afternoon and welcome to my presentation on cyberbullying. My name is Cynthia Rieger. I'm coming to you from the great state of Louisiana on LSU's campus at the LSU Lab School in an 8th grade middle school science classroom. I focused on the case study 11.3 for this assignment because it connected to me. I have a middle schooler, as it is, who we are right now navigating the amount of social media he's allowed to have. I have an 11-year-old girl coming into middle school, and I have a young 8-year-old boy. And bullying has been a common theme as a teacher for the past 21 years, and it has now become harder to catch the bullies because of cyberbullying. And I found this case study was a great example of a struggle an administrator might have with this problem. All right, so there's growing concern over cyberbullying among students. Online bullying that occurs outside of school hours. What is the ethical responsibility of the school, if any? So I focus on the cyberbullying from the in the middle, from the ethical leadership and decision-making text that we are covering. As you can see here, this is a small study group, about 5,000 kids, but still, they said in their lifetime, almost for boys and girls, half of them claim to have been cyberbullied, and in just the past 30 days, a little less than, say, around 25% on average of these students were cyberbullied in the past 30 days, which I find is very significant and impactful. That means that 30 days, 1 month, to be bullied and it's always with you, it's a struggle. All right, so the case study I focused on an 8th grade student. He was not the jock, he was a very reserved kid. He, as one would say, would be nerdy, a little different, and so he didn't really fit in, he didn't have a lot of friends, and his parents had just rewarded him with new devices because of his grades, because he was such a good student, and they started noticing he was getting a little withdrawn. His algebra score, pre-algebra test, he didn't score very well, and that's when the parents looked at their monitoring device and found that he was being bullied. Parents brought this to school administration, and the administration kind of had to decide what to do. At first, they didn't really do much because it was very hard to do because there was no student identified. There was, it was a made up name on there, and there was not even evidence that it was a student at the school. So a few weeks went by, young man was in a performance on stage, his voice cracked, and then he was bullied again. Now, his parents did take away the devices for a little while, being responsible parents, but they wanted to give it back to him. It's very hard nowadays not to give a child technology because assignments are on the computer, news is on the computer, this is how they socialize with friends, this is how they play games, all these things are on the computer. And so he went on his device and he was verbally, well, you say verbally, but digitally attacked by the same person, proving that this child or individual was at the school play and had evidence that he was part of their community. All right, so what exactly is cyberbullying? So according to the website stopbullying.gov, cyberbullying is bullying that takes place over digital devices like cell phones, computers, and tablets. Cyberbullying can include sending, posting, sharing, or sending negative, harmful, false, mean-contacted information. It can be sharing personal, private information about someone else, embarrassing them, humiliating them, or is basically crossing the line into criminal behavior. So the ethical dilemmas that administration would have to follow here and look at is jurisdiction over an off-campus situation. School is normally from around 7 to 3-ish, depending on where you live. And if it happened on campus, it can be dealt with on campus. In some situations, if it happened and it's easily to be proven that it's another student at the school, it can be taken care of at school. But in this situation, there was no way to prove that it was a student at school. You're also balancing students' rights of freedom of speech and protecting victims from harm. There's been groups that have stated that what individuals put online is a form of freedom of speech. It all depends on what side of the coin you're looking at there. One person's freedom of speech is another person feeling put down, demoralized, impacted. Then you have the responsibility to ensure emotional safety and equitable treatment. When students come into my classroom, I always want them to feel safe. As an administrator, I would want the whole school to feel safe. Nobody should come into a place that they spend many hours of the day at and not feel safe. And so administration has to figure out how to make someone feel safe and making sure that everybody is treated equally and maintaining fairness while disciplining students for an out-of-school behavior. If my child is involved in a situation and he is at fault, I understand there are rules and the consequences, but as a parent, the first thing you're going to do is defend your own child. And in this situation, and if the administration just falsely accuses somebody, you could have parents being very upset, suing the school. There's legal action. No parent wants to believe their child would commit cyberbullying. So administration has to take all of this stuff seriously, but they also don't need to be dragging their feet. In this situation, you had 3 weeks go by, and the parents were doing their part by taking away the devices. But it's not fair to the parents either, not fair to the child that he cannot have these devices that he worked so hard for because of another person's actions. So again, the ethical framework we're looking at here that should apply is justice and is there fairness, ensuring there's unbiased responsibility and equal protection for the victim. Prioritizing the well-being of the larger student community, because if they let this slide and they don't address this situation, it could escalate. Or if they address this situation poorly or accuse somebody the wrong way, it could escalate. So this is a really hard situation to deal with, and that's why I wanted to focus on this topic. And you want to make sure that these actions that are occurring outside the classroom are not affecting the inside the classroom, the education that is being taught. You don't want the kid to be distracted, feel poorly about themselves. You don't want their education to be suffering because of actions of others. Stakeholders, who is involved in dealing with this situation? Of course, the victim, the student, and his or her family. You want to make sure that they are being heard, they are being listened to, and you want to make sure the people that are responsible, the students that are responsible for the cyberbullying, is understanding why they're being called into the office, why there's disciplinary actions being enforced. You don't want the family of those individuals just to know they had punishment without being understood why the punishment occurred, what all the situations occurred at school versus out of school, and how it's affecting the child's school life. District leaders and potential legal counsel, because this should be a stepping stone in this situation to a policy, a greater impact on the community. And There may be situations where legal action is occurring, not in this case per se, but I've known of cases where pictures were distributed, individuals were, as you could say, catfished and ridiculed. There could be legal actions. We've had situations at our school where images were distributed and you had minors involved, and police, law enforcement were called in. So there could and there probably will be legal actions in a lot of these situations. And the broader school community and peer groups, because people need to know how to support each other, and people need to know how to identify the problem, and people need to know how to educate those who could be a potential bully in the future. All right, the challenge of the leadership. First of all, if they discipline the child, is it legally the right discipline for the situation? Can it be supported? You don't want it to be sent to the school board, be appealed, be overturned. You want to make sure students' rights are not being interfered. You're not going to go through devices without warrant cause. You want to rebuild the trust of the victim and their family, because right now, coming to them, having that 3-week period where nothing really was done, the family didn't feel heard. The child wasn't protected. He was not in a safe environment anymore, and therefore he was not feeling safe at school. You want to make sure every child, no matter what, even the bully, needs to feel safe at school, because being a teacher for so long, knowing a whole bunch about education, being parts of eye-care groups, a lot of times there's a reason the bully is bullying, and you need to make sure you have a safe environment for that individual to communicate their issues, because a lot of times there could be issues outside of the school that could be causing this child to act out in such a way. So, lessons learned from this case. Schools must address off-campus actions. It's important to clearly define cyberbullying policies, the necessities of student education in this digital world, and how school leaders need to model ethical responsibilities. I know most schools do some sort of technology lesson, whole school. Some schools in the Baton Rouge area are considered 24-hour schools, so if there's an action like this that takes place, it's easily being able to taken care of and disciplined. Our school is still working on the addressing off-campus situations such as cyberbullying, and that's part of the reason why I found this case study one I wanted to dive into more, because if I move into administration, even just being as a teacher leader at the school and a parent of students at the school, this needs to be clearly defined so that we don't run into these problems, because we've had situations in the past where a student was bullied. There was a lot of evidence and none of the individuals involved received any discipline action because they got legal representation and it didn't follow the code of ethics, and therefore the child and the bullies were still in the same classroom, which I feel is not fair. So preventative measurements, again, having a literacy program. I find doing the whole school or a large auditorium situation is not always the best. I find smaller groups would probably be best for this situation. Create some sort of anonymous reporting system. We do have a link on our website that allows students to turn in or, address problems like that. Engage parents in workshops. There needs to be more parent workshops for this. and try to collaborate with technology companies to track harmful behavior. Like I said, I'm navigating a 13-year-old right now. He does have less technology than his peers. He has a phone that he gets sometimes, but he is in some text message groups, which I find is the worst. And we get notified if there's any sort of bullying action. And I find more parents need to step up and do this. And I understand children need to feel like they have privacy space, but this is not okay. This is how I've known of students who get suspended from school. And nowadays it's not just Snapchat, it's these group text messages, Discord, GroupMe. All of these are a harmful situation. My son's friend this past year showed his father a situation where he was being bullied, and the dad came up. There was images. It all involved students from the school. Students were taken care of, but they didn't get much of a punishment, which is the problem, because it was considered an out-of-school situation. So, in conclusion, this case study, like I said, resonated with me. It showed how the school has an ethical obligation to ensure student safety and well-being in and outside the classroom. If you are a leader in this situation, you're required to have careful, consistent, and compassionate decision making. Have a proactive policy. The summer's coming up. This is the best time for schools to revamp their policy, and this is something that really should be done. And in fact, it is something we are doing this summer at our school. And there are my references, and if you would like access to my presentation, I will have a link in the comments below. So again, my name is Cynthia Rieger. I'm coming to you from the University Lab School on LSU's campus in my 8th grade science classroom. And this is my TEDish type talk. Thank you.